Hello and welcome to Classically Imperfect, a mental health organization dedicated to providing mental health and wellness resources to young classical musicians. I'm Mary Salde, the founder and executive director, and today I am joined by Gloria Lum, an LA film musician, music educator, and founder of Audition Confidential. Hi, Gloria, how are you?
Hi, Mary. So nice to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you so much for being here. Let's just get right into it. Can you tell us a little bit about your musical background and how you got involved in classical music?
Of course. I attended Berkeley School District, Berkeley, California. That's where I grew up. And, I wanted to say first that I come from a very sort of working class family. My dad was a butcher. My mom was a school secretary. They didn't go to college, and we really had no interest whatsoever in our family in classical music. So it was really through the Berkeley school system that I first started learning how to play the cello and things like that. But just a quick aside, when I was 3, my dad brought home a toy piano. And apparently I started picking out tunes from commercials on that. So they figured out, oh, maybe this kid has a little bit of musical talent. And so they actually gave me piano lessons starting at the age of 4. So I was already kind of set up in music prior to starting the cello at the age of 8 in the Berkeley School District.
Mm, that's really
So yeah, so it was a lot of fun. I went through school. Berkeley itself had a very rich music program in the public schools. There were also a fair amount of youth orchestras, which I joined, I think, starting in the 10th grade. So that's how I kind of got interested in playing in orchestras because I had been doing it for such a long time prior to going into college.
Yeah, that's really cool. And you attended both UCLA and USC. Was that both for music?
Yes, when I went to UCLA and when I graduated from high school, I wasn't completely sure that I wanted to become a classical musician. And so I decided that UCLA was a wonderful place because I could take all the different classes I wanted. So I took a lot of English and art history and, German and all sorts of fun stuff. I was also a music major, but I really wanted to have sort of a wider breadth of education before I decided whether or not music was something I wanted to go into. So I actually transferred after my sophomore year to USC, where I got my bachelor's at that point in music.
Oh, wow. I think I'm going to be attending USC this coming year. So
Ah, congratulations.
thank you. Can you tell us, or is that all of the background that you want to go into, or is there something else?
Um, just that, when you're young and you're learning how to play in an orchestra, there are so many things that go into creating a really sort of complete musician, I'd say. And we're always trying to complete ourselves. I still learn a lot of things, but I think that you have to be open to a lot of different influences when you're growing up, and a lot of it is not just playing your instrument, although that's important, but how to get along with people. How to work well with people. That's a big part of orchestral playing, and certainly in chamber music.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's it. All kind of comes together in
Mhm.
order to create like who you are as a musician.
Yeah, definitely. What was your first serious or professional audition experience like? How did you prepare for it properly?
Well, the very first professional audition I ever took was for San Francisco Symphony, and I was a senior at USC. So I knew I was like looking down the barrel of, oh, what am I going to do once I graduate? And I thought, well, orchestral music is probably something that would be a good career move. So at
Mhm.
the time, at the beginning of my senior year at USC, my teacher, who was the cello professor there at the time, Gabor Raito, wonderful teacher, had taken a sabbatical.
Mhm.
And the pretty new principal of the LA Philharmonic, who was Ronald Leonard, came in and he took a few of Raito's students. And I thought, wow, I really want to go study with this man. So I studied with him for that semester, the fall semester. The audition was in the spring. And so when that came up, I thought, well, wouldn't it be smart of me to actually like study with somebody who is the principal of a major orchestra? And
Mhm.
so, of course, I asked my teacher's permission if it was okay for me to do that. And he said, yes, of course, go ahead and study excerpts with Mr. Leonard. So I went and I brought him the list, and I really don't think I knew anything about excerpts. I really didn't know what to expect,
Mhm.
but I went and I played for him, and he helped me through a lot of the excerpts. I think maybe I only went 2 or 3 times, which is not enough. But he gave me sort of an idea of what it is I needed to do. So I went to the audition, and it was in the San Francisco War Memorial Opera House, which is like this incredible building in San Francisco. And it was something, a place that, having grown up in the Bay Area, I had spent time going to see the ballet and, opera and stuff like that. So it was really exciting. But I had no idea how to really prepare. So when I got out on stage, I think they asked for the beginning of a concerto. So I played Dvorak. I thought, okay, that's going pretty well. And then they asked me to play, I think, from something from Strauss. And I had no idea what I was doing
Mhm.
because I hadn't really prepared it, because I was like, oh, this is really too hard tonight, because I looked at the excerpt list and maybe it's something that we hadn't really gotten to. So
Mhm.
I think I played that kind of like tried to make my way through that. And maybe another excerpt said, thank you very much. And then that was it.
Mhm.
So I remember going back and talking to my teacher, talking to Mr. Leonard, and saying, so this is what happened. And, he said something to me that just really made a huge impression. He said, I probably should have prepared you better.
Mhm.
And, that's something that has really stuck with me, that as a teacher, he felt personally responsible for not having really prepared me in the way that he thought I should be prepared.
Mhm.
So that is something that has stuck with me for many, many years.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of teachers probably have that burden, especially when preparing students for auditions. I know my teacher, she's Rebecca Real.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she's very tough on me, but in every way that she needs to be. And I think it's almost like some type of parental relationship with a student because like she will tell me, she will call me out on everything, no matter if I had like a very busy week that week. It's always about, getting prepared for your auditions. And I remember 1 week before my Boston Conservatory audition, I had a lesson with her and she just wanted to make me feel as prepared as I could, like giving me as many notes as possible. And it was probably the best decision that she could have made. And I really admire all private lesson teachers because it's such a big responsibility taking in someone new who probably had so many more teachers before them and then giving them that guidance. And yeah, so I really admire especially LA film musicians giving YOLO students the opportunity to have these lessons because it's so important. And before my lessons with Rebecca, I could not tell you how much she changed me. Like she changed my posture. I used to have terrible back pain and it's like all gone because of her. So I really admire every time I see you guys on stage. It's like it's crazy. And I'm so glad to be able to do this interview with you. We really admire you guys. Um,
Thank you.
how should students seeking a professional orchestra career prepare for auditions? Can you tell us a little bit about Audition Confidential?
Sure. I created Audition Confidential mainly because I studied with Ron Leonard and
Mhm.
because of what he said to me, which is I should have prepared you better. And for many, many years, I've been in the Philharmonic for many, many years. And for at least half that time, I have been on the Auditions and Renewals Committee. So
Mhm.
I have had a chance to play many auditions and also be on the other side of the screen to, judge auditions. And I think that, especially with younger people, there are so many things that you don't really know until you actually do it. A lot of times, we can't know what we don't know until we get there. So
Mhm.
there are a lot of experiences, things that happen to you during auditions that maybe you don't expect. Maybe you don't expect that you're going to like get super nervous and not remember like how to play something, or, so there are so many aspects to it. And having done them and having listened to them, there's kind of a checklist of how you should approach an audition in terms of preparation. And I think that one of the mistakes I made as a young player was thinking, okay, I know this piece, I can play it, and it'll be fine. But I think nowadays, or really at any time when there's a lot of pressure on, there are a lot of things that kind of fly out of your mind. And it's like, oh, what was I going to do there? And we can't always know how we're going to respond to a stressful situation. So one of the big things that I do in my company, which is Audition Confidential, is we talk a lot about how to really prepare completely. And that means not only technically, but also mentally. A lot of being able to play a successful audition is really how we come to it mentally. How do we take care of that distracting voice? Or how do we try and not think about that shift that's coming up that we're really scared of, or that really fast passage? So there's a combination of really good practicing techniques that we talk about, like how to practice slowly, how to really take our time, how to listen really, really carefully, how to use the metronome, how to use a tuner. And so not only are we preparing, there is that technical aspect, but one of the things I really believe in is pairing a really positive attitude. Because as I'm practicing, I really want to have a positive voice in my head. Because
Mhm.
I know that as musicians, we are critical and we have to be, but we can be critical and not be mean to ourselves. And one of the things I know that a lot of people say to themselves when they miss something is, oh, darn it, that's terrible. You're a bad musician, or, you're a bad player. And
Mhm.
that kind of mental script really does not help you when you're under stress. So
Mhm.
one of the things that I like to teach is we want to treat ourselves like we would treat a colleague or a student, and the things that we often say to ourselves is never going to be something that we say to a student.
Mhm.
So when we are under stress, the voice I want to hear in my head is one of, encouragement, positivity, and just sort of calm. So I think it's really important that when we practice, we also are practicing that mental sort of state. So
Mhm.
that's a big part of it. The other thing I would say is, you know, it's really hard to play a great audition, and it's really hard to put yourself in the right frame of mind when you're like, oh, I really want this job, or I really want to get into this school, and we're just adding pressure upon pressure. And one of the things that I like to tell my students and my clients is when you're playing an audition, the only thing you have control over is how you play, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah.
And if I go out on stage, if I can say my only goal is to play as beautifully as I possibly can and to kind of show where I am at this moment in my musical career
Mhm.
and feel good about, yes, that is as that's how I sound. That's what I want to do. Then I can walk off stage and say that was a success. Because honestly, in an audition, uh, after you play, you have no control. You have no control over what happens. Yo-Yo Ma could be right behind you and come out and just blow everyone out of the water, or some other great player, or sometimes committees have different ideas of what they're looking for. So I think that when we go in for an audition, it's more important to concentrate on what our goal is. And I think our goal should always be, I'm going to play my very best, and then you make your own decision from there. Like, yes, I did it, and then feel good about it, no matter what the outcome is. So a lot of approaching an audition is how we frame it in the larger sense of things, and knowing that at your age you're going to be facing many auditions. You will grow a tremendous amount in the next 5, 10, 15 years if you continue on the way you are, and that everyone has their own pace and everyone has their own journey. So every audition we take is like a stepping stone along your artistic growth and your musical journey. And knowing that you have like a long time ahead of you, I think can give us sort of comfort, because nobody just like shoots to the top. Maybe a couple people do, but they are the rare zebra. It doesn't happen. Most of us work along a certain path, and that's all good. And to just sort of accept yourself and your progress for where you are, and just know that you're working hard and that it's all going to happen for you the way it should.
Yeah, definitely. And I know really recently a lot of college decisions came out and a lot of like pre-screening decisions came out. And at Classically Imperfect, we did a bunch of posts
Mm.
trying to like, help those musicians who maybe didn't get past their auditions or their pre-screenings. Do you have any advice to give current high school seniors who have experienced this rejection or high school seniors that are going to go through that process this coming year?
Yes, that's such a good thing. And really, as musicians taking auditions, we are deal with rejection all the
Mhm.
time. I don't like to think of it as rejection because it really hurts. And
Yeah.
because we put so much of ourselves and our hopes and our dreams into that, it can really hurt. But I do want to say, to be a successful musician, to be a successful artist, you have to keep doing that. You
Mhm,
have to make yourself vulnerable and say, this is what I want, and I'm going to work as hard as I can to get it.
mhm,
Now, there will be plenty of times where you don't get the outcome you desire. You won't get that job. You won't get into that school. You won't make it past the pre-screening. And you
mhm,
have to say to yourself, okay, what that is, it's somebody telling me that maybe I haven't progressed as much as I should have, or not so much as I should have, but maybe where I am at this point in my career, my playing, is not yet ready for that next step.
mhm,
And I look at that as saying, how can I learn from this particular decision that someone has made regarding my playing? And I think it's important to say there is validity, some sort of validity in a decision that somebody made if they decide not to hire me or not to accept me into a school. And I'm going to go back and say, okay, let me go back and think to myself, what did I do? How could I be better? What are the things that I need to work on? And
mhm,
again, while we want to accept the fact that, ooh, that really hurt, and that really hurt my ego, it hurt my feelings, and that kind of feels bad. And absolutely, you should feel all those things, but don't stay there.
mhm,
Don't stay in that negative attitude. Just say, okay, I took that hit, I'm gonna like take some time to understand it and come out with something positive. And maybe sometimes what happens is that means that I'm gonna turn in a different direction. Maybe I didn't get into the school I wanted to, but there's this other school that I'm gonna go to instead. And maybe there will be opportunities there that will be better suited to me and
mhm,
where I am right now. There's always another way. And I
mhm,
really want to warn people against staying in that. I don't want to say victim, but I think there's a little bit of a victim attitude, like, oh darn, they were so mean. Why didn't they ask?
mhm,
There's sort of a negative thing. And and I think that's sort of self-protective because nobody wants to feel rejected. And so you want to blame the other people for not recognizing your brilliance or whatever.
mhm,
But, deep down, it's because it hurts that we do that. And it's okay. It's totally okay to feel rejected, to feel sad. And then once you kind of accept that, then you go on and say, okay, well, I'm not the only person who's in this boat right now. There are plenty of other people who didn't make it past the first round or whatever. How am I going to take this particular seemingly negative experience and turn it into something positive? Now,
mhm,
that's not an easy thing to do, but I
mhm,
think that if you then realize that there are other options, there are always other options, and to leave yourself open to them, I think it can be a sort of an easier way to deal with something that feels like rejection.
mhm. Yeah, definitely. And I also think it's very important for every musician to go through the process of rejection. I mean, musicians have gone through this process since the very beginning. I remember as a violinist myself, when we were auditioning for seating, I would always be placed in the second violins. And, there's kind of always this like first violin versus second violin thing going on in every orchestra, probably around the world. And I would be so like caught up in like, oh my God, I'm a second violin. I'm not good enough to be in the firsts. And now I feel like that kind of helped me see the violin world and the orchestra world more clearly because it gave me this sense of like, okay, I'm gonna get rejections in the past and it's always gonna happen. And I think it's like almost rejection specifically for college is almost the first step for professional in a professional musician's real life because like you said, professional musicians have so many auditions, especially for orchestras, and they go through so many rejections and there's first callbacks and seconds and thirds, and you don't always get past those. And I think it's really important for a musician, especially during college, during this season, to understand that there's so many other musicians in this world who are going through the same process, like you said, and really just take it in. I remember when I was getting all of because I did get rejected from so many schools this year,
Mhm.
but I I just like kept looking forward and I knew that I had USC and I knew that I had these other schools. So I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to focus on the schools that I have now. I'm not going to think about the other ones because like you said, if you keep thinking about that, you're going to stay there. And I did not want to stay there. I'm not one of those people who likes to, you know, think about only myself and like kind of like self-absorb and like all of that. And but yeah, I think it's really helpful to just look forward and move on. And I also wanted to ask another side question, like, was there a specific routine that you had when auditioning for um like a major philharmonic? This kind of ties into the second question. What is one thing you wish you knew before auditioning for a major philharmonic like the LA Phil?
Well, I think one of the things that I try to do in my company is to kind of prepare people and say there are a lot of different things that you need to consider, not just the notes on the page.
Mhm.
So knowing for one thing, like when you're playing an excerpt or you get an excerpt in the mail, like this is what you need to prepare, you need to realize that this is one line in an entire orchestra. So
Mhm.
while that may be an important line, which is why they're asking it, you also have to know everybody else's part. So this is something that on an audition committee we can tell within maybe 15 seconds whether or not somebody has ever actually played it in an orchestra.
Mhm.
Because one thing that's really important, and we're talking now sort of professional auditions,
Mhm.
is that an audition committee is not just made up of, like, for instance, violins in the case of a violin audition. It's made up of members of the entire orchestra.
Mhm.
So if you're playing your part, and I'm like maybe the principal flute player, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm playing that line along with you, and I normally have to take a breath there. Oh, you're not letting me take that breath there, are you? Okay, clearly you haven't played this.
Mhm.
So there are really very fine details, when we're looking at our excerpts that don't appear on the actual part. So, one of the things that we need to do is really kind of study the whole piece and or at least that part. What is the entire orchestra doing while I'm playing this excerpt? Because while I'm playing this excerpt in an audition, everybody else there on the committee is singing their part. And if you don't allow for their part to come through, or
Mhm.
you're not like understanding that, that's one thing that will sort of signal that you're not maybe completely prepared to be in that orchestra.
Mhm.
So there are very specific musical things that you need to know. Um, like we said earlier, in terms of the mental preparation, there's a ton of mental preparation and trying to put yourself in positions where you're uncomfortable or stressed out, which is why we do a lot of mock auditions. So we play for people that make us nervous to see how does that feel. Oh shoot, I missed that shift because I was so nervous because of these people. So things like that you want to gain as much self-knowledge as possible before you go into an audition. Like, how am I going to react? One of the things I have my clients do is sometimes, people are like, oh, I really hate playing in front of a screen because it freaks me out. So what I'll
Mhm.
say is, okay, go find a wall, sit right in front of the wall or stand right in front of the wall and play your entire audition. So what we want to do is try and put ourselves through as many distractions and difficult situations as possible. Play in a really dead room.
Mhm.
How does that feel? Suddenly, people say, I was really thrown by the acoustics. So the more preparation you can do, sort of the better you are equipped to go into an audition and just basically say, I can do this. You can have monkeys, like running across the stage, and I won't even see it because I'm so prepared.
Mhm.
So there are those aspects. I think another really important thing is how to organize your practice time. Often, we'll get a list of maybe 16 different excerpts. And if you've never played them or you've played half of them, it's like, well, how do I learn this? And so being really organized and saying, okay, coming up with a practice plan, like, okay, if I have 2 hours every day, am I going to try and go through everything, every day? The answer to that is no. So you have to be really smart about how you organize your practice time. I have something that I call the it's like an audition timeline countdown. So it's like preparing for a marathon. So you have the audition day and you have 6 or 8 weeks prior to it. And you want to be able to map out, how am I going to practice? Where am I going to start playing mock auditions? When am I going to, work on this particular thing? And how
Mhm.
do I get everything so that I'm really prepared to play my very best on every excerpt? So there's all that sort of stuff that goes into audition preparation. And I, of course, didn't know any of this when I was taking auditions. And a lot of it is just sort of hard-won experience because you
Mhm.
do a lot of auditions and you think, oh my gosh, I should have done this. And then you put that into your bag for next time.
Mhm.
So when run my courses, my hope is that I can help people just like get through, just sort of like, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to do this. I didn't know how to prepare for that. So
Mhm,
that you don't have to spend 3 or 5 years taking auditions and spending thousands of dollars trying to figure this stuff out.
mhm,
So, there are a couple of people who do audition prep, and we all have our sort of our way of our sort of technique and things that we like to cover. But yeah, so that's sort of one of those things. I don't know, did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. I kind of had the follow-up question during this audition season and like this time that you're practicing so much for these auditions. Did you ever experience any type of injury or mental or physical burnout? And if so, because I know so many musicians, especially like a lot of my friends are experiencing injury right now and they're barely high school. And I was actually injured during
Mhm.
November during my audition season. And it kind of came back last like 3 weeks ago for no reason. Like I was fine January, February, I was fine. And then it came back during March and I had to cancel a bunch of my lessons and I had to tell my teacher, like, I'm sorry, but like my arm is hurting a lot. Like, do you have any advice or like, how to handle injury and what to do to prevent injury? I know it's like a big thing that musicians don't really talk as much as they should be talking about, especially for something so important. But if you had any input on that.
Absolutely. One of the things I talk about is physical preparation. And a lot of times, especially I find with violinists and violists, because it's very awkward, cellists a little less so, but having a teacher who can really see what you're doing physically, because often when you're a young player, you develop habits, maybe you're leaning over, maybe you're, lifting your arm, you're doing stuff that really doesn't help and actually can injure yourself. And of course, you want to practice a lot, and the more you do it, the more likely it is you have an injury. So
Mhm,
first off, I think it's really important. Hopefully you find a teacher who can say, you know what, you really need to do X, Y, or Z because you're going to run into trouble if you don't. And
mhm,
a great teacher will be able to kind of see those things before you do it. The other thing that I would say is if you start to hurt while you're practicing, stop
mhm,
because that means you're doing something wrong. And the
mhm,
other thing is, and I know that young people, it's like, oh, but I can practice so many hours a day. And if I just practice more hours a day, I'll be better. And I'll say to that, yeah, take it from someone who's a lot older and someone who actually hated practicing a lot.
mhm,
I think that I would prefer people, young students, and really anybody, to figure out how to play more efficiently,
mhm,
practice more effectively. And if
mhm.
you do that, you don't have to put in 6 hours a day. You just don't, unless you're Hillary Hahn. But I mean, in terms of really understanding your body and being aware of that, and I think that that's really critical for all musicians because our bodies are like an integral part of our music making. And if something goes wrong, we can't do it.
Mhm,
So first of all, if you start to hurt, maybe you can identify it. Is it actually something I'm doing while I'm playing? Is it because I'm tense? I think just kind of becoming a little bit more aware of how you use your body is important. Now, I know a lot of people in the Philharmonic, we all do things like work out and run, do
mhm,
Pilates, do yoga, stuff like that. So there's a wide recognition among my colleagues and myself that we have to take care of the whole body.
mhm.
I know as a cellist, I'm constantly telling people you really have to play from your core. You have to use your back. It's not just in your arms. So becoming more aware of how your entire body works is a big part of it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it definitely depends on your teacher. Like I said, my teacher has helped me so much with my back pain. And I think that maybe some musicians don't have access to like very good teachers, which also might cause them to have bad injury and burnout.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, that leads me to my last question. Do you believe there are enough mental health and wellness resources in the classical music community?
I think there are more than there used to be, and I think there's less people feeling like, oh, I can't talk about how I feel. And one thing that I want to go back to, you asked about, sort of the mental stress of preparing, of just being a musician.
Mhm,
I think it's super important to realize that we are a community,
mhm,
and to reach out to your community, to reach out to your colleagues and say, I'm hurting, or, I feel bad, or I'm worried about this, because I find that when we can share things that we're concerned about, it suddenly takes the burden off. And you find that everybody feels this way, so I think what you're doing is wonderful in terms of just shining a light on those parts of maybe our music making that are less than always wonderful because we put so much pressure on ourselves.
Mhm.
And I think that, mental health in general is something that needs to be addressed just across the board, and certainly among musicians also.
Mhm.
Um, so I think that the more transparent we can be about, what we're going through, to reach out to your teacher, to reach out to your friends, and just sort of start talking about it is a very important first step, because there's nothing to be ashamed of.
Mhm.
We all deal with the same kinds of human emotions. And sometimes when we reach out to our friends or other people, an adult that we trust, they can give us those tools to help us figure out, how do I need to deal with this? How do I deal with like crippling fear or feeling like I'm not good enough? And you'll find out everybody has
Mhm.
those issues and those thoughts and those fears. So I think that it's something that you can, I mean, certainly you are doing this with your podcast, which I think is wonderful, to talk about these issues,
Mhm.
that really affect all human beings.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I always like to mention is specifically in like classical music, I think there are definitely more positives than negatives. It's just like growing up, like I never really saw any of these issues being talked about. So we kind of want to reflect that to younger generations specifically so that they feel like don't feel like the same way that maybe you and I did when we were younger. But at the
Mhm.
same time, classical music is amazing and I love every single aspect of it, even the auditions and the rejections and the hard parts of it. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. And if you want to learn more about Classically Imperfect, make sure to click the link in our bio. Bye.
Thank you.